More than 900 colonies of dung beetles have been released in New Zealand over the past decade, the result of years of research by Dr. Sean Forgie and dung beetle innovations partner Andrew Barber. Now they're establishing large populations of beetles ready to be introduced to farmland around the country. The business is aiming to support sustainable management practices and pastoral farming systems, improving water quality, soil health and productivity. Sean Forgie explains.
We've undergone a significant expansion into what's turned out to be the largest mass rearing facility for dung beetles and insects, actually. So we occupy a 3.2 hectare site on a long-term lease, and we produce a large amount of these IBC bins that you can see sitting around us here at the moment, in which we use those for breeding large amounts of dung beetles for farmers. We've got about 8 types of dung beetles that are here at the moment. All have a different activity and a different seasonal activity. Some are active at night, some active at daytime. So we've got different beetles for different occasions, and even some varieties that are more suitable for lower rainfall environments. Depending on which type of beetle you are, you have an egg to an adult stage, and sometimes for the smaller beetles that's 6 to 8 weeks, and some of the bigger beetles it can be 3 months, to the biggest ones it can be underground egg to an adult for 1 year to 2 years. You can speed that whole process up by increasing the temperature, and so we can get that egg to adult a lot quicker, and we can get those beetles developing a new generation much faster to ship them off to the customers around the country quicker. This is the first and only time it's been grown on scale in New Zealand, and certainly the scale in the world. Our neighbours in Australia have been rearing dung beetles through the government since the 60s, but not on this scale, and previously would be doing it in small bots and small containers inside laboratories. But to do it on a commercial scale, you need to make things bigger and more of it. And so really, I look at a 1 cubic metre bin, much in the same way as a 10-litre pail of soil. I just can put more beetles in a bigger bin. And the more soil you've got in there, the less fluctuations in temperature and whatnot. So in soil temperature in a little bucket undergoes more temperature variations than a big pile of soil. It's far more stable environment. And so do that on a big scale, we get really good results coming out of our huge bins. All of the dung beetles that we work with all make nests deep underground, and they all produce balls or sausages of manure, and into those the mum and dad beetle will lay an egg, and then they'll cap it off, leave it, and do another bunch of these all the way into that whole soil profile. So we've pulled some of these balls out of the ground to show you, because this is what some of them look like. Inside one of these balls you can see what the grub looks like that's been living in it. The grub lives inside that home of manure built for it by mum and dad. And for this variety of beetle, probably about 2 to 3 months' time, it's going to turn into a bigger beetle and into a brand new adult, and the adult's going to burrow out, fly up, and repeat the whole process again into the poo. When you consider New Zealand's environment for pasture, we import livestock, but we didn't import the sorts of beetles that are suitable to that kind of environment to get rid of all of that poo. And we've estimated, 100 million tonnes of cow and sheep poo produced a year in New Zealand. If I put that into context, that's putting an Olympic-sized pool head to tail from Cape Reinga down to Bluff filled with poo each year. That's a lot of poo on the farm. The dung beetles that we've imported into New Zealand through a government process are suited to the sorts of environments we have in New Zealand. So these ones are suited to the types of frosts we get in the south, to high rainfall places in the west, and areas that need irrigating and stuff. So we've got specific beetles adapted to the specific types of environments we have from the top of New Zealand to the bottom of New Zealand. When a farmer receives a particular colony or a release colony of beetles, it may well be anywhere between 500 to several thousand beetles in a colony. Within that colony, there's about half of them are females and half of them are males. And off that population, they grow exponentially. And so one female produces maybe 50 to 60, 70 babies in her lifetime. And if that's every 6 to 8 weeks for which particular variety, the numbers of beetles growing on your farm increase exponentially until you get to a certain point where you've got a carrying capacity sustained proportional to how much poo you've got on your farm. all new recruits over and above that carrying capacity move on to your neighbouring farms. And so the biggest question a farmer will then ask me is, well, are my neighbours going to benefit from these beetles? Well, the answer is yes. But by then, you've achieved all your economic and your environmental gains, which is what you got onto this in the first place. And so really what you're doing is that whole catchment area is benefiting ultimately. So really it's a one-off process for you to receive beetles. And then once they're out, there's no ongoing management. They just self-replicate and spread, grow, follow in behind the stock movements. And that's really what you want, because once you've got a carrying capacity beetle, which is typically about 9 years after you've released it, and about year 5, we start seeing the economic and environmental gains kick in. But year 9 is when they're just literally everywhere, and that's when your poo starts disappearing within 24 to 48 hours of it coming out of the animal. And that's really the end target. The potential for New Zealand is extraordinarily high. The economic potential is so great. What we estimate is something like $6 million a year, which is a tiny proportion of money compared to other mitigation tools that are currently available for things like riparian planting and fencing. If we include dung beetles into that process at that value, it's going to go a long way over 10 years to achieve something like $1 billion improvement a year down the track. And so economically, we can't afford not to be jumping on board with this at a national scale, because really $6 million a year is a tiny amount of money when it's the potential that you can achieve from something like this.